Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television. Today, the 26th of June, 2024. Quite a number of stories on the paper we will be looking at, and we hope that you can join us through Facebook and YouTube. Then drop your comment, your views on any of the issue we will be discussing from the papers this morning. I am Sele Laishidashu. I'll be doing the program alongside Rachel Tansy. Good morning.
Morning,
How you doing?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm great, thank you so much. All right, we should get straight into the paper, starting with the Guardian newspaper. Poor states rank up debts, leave $335 million minerals to illegal miners, and we've seen the picture of the various mineral resources that are being found, and then with the various states where all of these are found, talking about gemstone, gold, iron, roy, and talc. So you can find all of that, and then the money that we can actually realize from all of these. So more detail can be found on page 6. On cholera, 10 million Almajiri Street kids at high risk. You can find that on page 10. Ban A, talking about electricity, court restrain Ikeja Electric NERC from applying new tariff. Custom mourn as DC dies at National Assembly during Reps probe. You can find detail of that on page 4. And on the issue of craft concern, as EFCC shelves Opabio, Adamu, Autumn, and others files. And this have been a concern to Nigerians because for almost getting to 8 years right now, we've been having the issue of talking about the issue of crafts and then probing both SAZIN as well as past politicians. You can find detail of that on page 4. On minimum wage, private sector insists on 62,000 naira as Tinubu consult governors and others. Private sectors insist on 62,000 naira as Tinubu consult governors and others. Federal government bans single-use plastic styrofoam packs in MDAs. You can find that on page 5. Clark urged Tinubu to intervene in Rivers' political logjam. Despite denial, Sokoto Assembly consider new bill against Sultan. You can find more detail of that as well on page 5. And that's all on Guardian newspaper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, worst of Naira volatility over. Statement from Cardoso says MPC determined to curb inflation. You can find details on page 21. The big story, minimum wage, Tinubu to consult with governors, private sectors, and labor. Federal Executive Committee steps down memo. Deputy Rep Speaker Lutz call for Nnamdi Kanu's release. Customs Deputy Controller slums dies at the Rep investigative hearing. The writer says House warns companies over absence at public hearing. Minister NSA tax media on better security reportage, misinformation, fake news as damaging as terrorism. Statement from Idris. You can find details on page 27. Senate not involved in purchase of presidential jet. A statement from Opabio. Ways and means scrutinization responsible for 24 trillion naira debt rise. A report from the Debt Management Office. On cholera, federal government in talks with Gavi over vaccine shortage. Details can be found on page 28. Article 6 constitutional rule for traditional rulers urges governors to respect traditional institutions. On Dangote refinery, oil marketers deny importing dirty fuel. You can find details on page 25, and we have a picture story 1 where we can see the Forum of Former Deputy Governors of Nigeria holding her second Joint Board of Trustee National Executive Committee meeting in Abuja on the 22nd of June 2024. In that, we order of a brewing company awarding awards to winners. This happened in Lagos, and that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. CBN project lower inflation, says reforms attract $24 billion inflow. Federal government meets local refineries over pricing, faults Dangote. Senate didn't approve new presidential jet coming from the Senate President Opabio. Court orders Emefiele to forfeit $1.4 million bribery proceeds. You can find that as well in the paper. Custom mourners officer dies at Rep's investigative hearing. The big story here is still on minimum wage. Labour kicks as flex step down memo demands consultation. Failure to discuss memo gives room for speculation, NLC tells the government. Here we are seeing the picture story with a rider under 5 killed as anti-tax protesters invade Kenyan parliament. You can find that detailed in the paper, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Vanguard newspaper, Cardoso upbeat on taming inflation, supports measures to boost external reserves. Chivido 2024 Lagos Island stands still as Davido and Trauma exchange marital vows. On cholera outbreak, Tinubu directs FEC to set up committee to oversee emergency operations. Federal government moves to sell 3 aircraft in presidential fleet to buy 1. The big story, Tinubu to consult governors OPS on minimum wage. Coming from the federal government says he can't take decision on new minimum wage alone. Insists the input of governors LGA's OPS vital. Era of paying slave wage gone, a statement from Labour. Any amount above 62,000 naira will create crises and job loss, a statement from NECA. You can find details on page 5. No plan to dethrone Sultan, coming from Sokoto government. On insecurity, NSA alerts on terrorist recruitment plots using media platforms. Rivers crisis, anti-Fubara protest rocks Port Harcourt. Wike not ready for peace, Clark tells Tinubu. Details can be found on page 12. Debt Management Office attributes rise in public debt to FX reforms and NPR hikes. We have a column by Afe Babalola on page 22, and then sports, Liverpool battle Man United for Lukman. Details can be found on page 38, and then also a picture story showing at Davido and Trauma's wedding. That's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
All right, on this day newspaper, coming from the finance minister Wale Edu, he said Tinubu's government has revamped Nigeria's economy. Says Nigeria total debt stock deep by 15% in dollar term, put outstanding ways and means at 3.4 trillion naira. And the Debt Management Office is saying forex, interest rate, securitization of ways and means push up the public debt. And we have multilateral creditors own $20.82 billion, China $5 million. Detail of that can be found on the front page as well on page 9. And we have Julian Assange leave prison in plea deal with the U.S. government. You can find more concerning that story on page 8. 5 persons shot dead, dozen wounded as protesters storm parliament in Kenya. More detail found on page 9 too. To resolve FX liquidity pressure, CBN orders bank IMTOs to settle diaspora remittance in Naira, with the rider saying move to boost access, strengthen local currency, provides option for same-day settlement. And then we are having the CBN governor Cardoso saying CBN will adhere to conventional methods to tame inflation. And then we have optimistic on achieving price stability. More detail found in the paper. Here we have a picture story down here. Zenith Bank Group CEO visit Mr. Governor, that's in Lagos, yesterday. Do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Nigerian Tribune newspaper, starting with the big story on the paper, we have FEC steps down memo on new minimum wage. Tinubu to consult governors, private sector. The statement from Information Minister says wage award will continue for now. We expect new wage implementation by July ending. A statement from Labour. Details can be found on page 8. No plan to dethrone Sultan and assurance from Sokoto government. Student loan, federal government postpone application process for state institutions. Custom Deputy Controller General Slums dies at Rep investigative hearing. FEC approves Interministerial Committee on Emergency Operations. This is for cholera outbreak. Ways and Means securitization responsible for 24 trillion naira debt rise. A report from the Debt Management Office. Cardoso expresses optimism about taming inflation. Says CBN will adhere to conventional methods. Explosion rocks Port Harcourt kills dynamite-bearing protester. Anti-Fubara forces enjoying federal might, Clark tells Tinubu. You can find details on page 27. That's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Nation newspaper, EFCC tenders a Methodist account statement. I want to travel abroad. You want to know who said that? Do well to read detail of that on page 4. Davido whips gets 85 million naira SUV at the show-stopping wedding that happened yesterday. Detail of his wedding can be found on page 37. Sokoto government no plan to dethrone Sultan Abubakar. And then we have economy indices remain positive, says Edu. CBN restore IMTO to foreign exchange market. Worst days of volatility are over, coming from the CBN. Family, friends, associate converge on Ajimobi's resident for Fidel. You can find detail of that on page 5. Minimum wage, Tinubu opts for more consultation. President to meet with governors, council chief, and private sector players. Where we're seeing FEC approvals 1.99 million naira to purchase 33 CNG vehicles, and the NDA gets 985 million naira for body scanners, and then $1.442 million to acquire arms and ammunition. This is what the FEC were able to approve during their meeting. More detail of all that happened during that you can find on the front page and continue on page 2. National Assembly to get supplementary budget tomorrow. Custom officer drops dead during questioning by House of Reps panel. More detail can be found on page 3. We have the picture story down here where we can see the governor of Lagos State and others during you can do well to get the paper and see what the occasion was. And that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On New Telegraph, the big story, minimum wage. Tinubu opts for further talks with governors and OPS. As TUC expects new wage next month, FEC sets panel to oversee cholera emergency. Approves $1.4 million for NDLEA arms and ammunition, 1.9 billion naira CNG vehicles, 985 million naira for body scanners. Federal government bans single-use plastics in MDAs. Still on the paper, CBN reforms policies stabilizing Naira, diaspora remittances, IMTO's access to official market boosted. These are all the reports coming from Cardoso. You can start with the details on the front page. And for the financial year of 2023, AMCON sustains profitability, recovers 125.2 billion naira. Details can be found on page 25. Terrorists using social media to promote dysfunctional information. This is an information coming from the NSA. You can find details on page 3 and 6. On dethronement, protect traditional institutions from arbitrariness of governors, the statement from Atiku. On jailbreak, federal government to fortify custodial centers with concrete perimeter fences. Davido weds trauma in lavish ceremony that broke the internet. Senate never proposed new aircraft for Tinubu, statement from Shetima. Helicopter sales reps other arrest of NCAT director. You can find details on page 28. In court, we have Cubana chief priest to forfeit 10 million naira to federal government campaign against naira mutilation. You can find details on page 31. Senior custom officer dies while testifying before reps. Why Nigeria's external local debts increased by 25%, says government no longer relying on CBN's ways and means. Investors cut import by 52% over expected price crash. This is on the Premium Motor Spirit. Details can be found on page 3. We have a study that says loneliness linked to stroke risks among older adults. Details can be found on page 28, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
Richard, I know we'll elaborate this later, but I just want to hear your view concerning, we're seeing here that the federal government is going to be consulting on the new minimum wage. And it kind of looked like a way for the federal government to escape saying something, and then eventually we'll see. Because right now it's going to be the ayes and the nays eventually, because if we are having this number of states saying, okay, you know what, as it is present, it's only 50,000 naira we'll be able to pay, and then we are having more than half, that is to say that that is going to be our new minimum wage, because that is what the body language Nigerians are going to get from it. And here we're seeing Labour is saying enough of the slave wage that we've been getting. So I mean, I just can't help but wonder what is really going on in the mind of the president, and as well in the mind of our National Assembly, for them to say, you know what, and even the FEC, because of course we know the FEC consult of even the governors, because they are part of the Federal Executive Council that do meet sometimes. So I'm wondering what is actually happening, but then we'll just keep our fingers crossed and see what will be the outcome of this consultation eventually.
Sela, the question I have for the federal government is that what was your reason for setting up a tripartite committee in the first place? What is this back and forth for? Did you somehow know at the back of your mind that Labour governors, the federal government, will not come to a point of agreement? Because the reason behind setting up a committee was for an agreement to take place and then given back to the federal government, and then the necessary process. So if we say federal government is going to start a consultation with who? It's the same people that you put in the committee. If it is the state governors, they are in the committee. If it is with Labour, they are in the committee. If it is with the private sector, they are in the committee. Who are you going to start the consultation with? It's the same people you put in a committee that couldn't come to an agreement. So what are you trying to do, or what are you trying to gain at the end of the day? The federal government of Nigeria know what they are expected to do, and they know what it means to do right by the citizens of this country, and they know very well that Labour is standing on the right ground. And I believe that that is why they keep beating round the bush, when they know very well that 62,000 naira is nothing, and that would be sheer wickedness as far as I'm concerned. They know that the minimum wage has to be substantial, has to be something reasonable and sensible, but they are not willing to do that. And that is why we still we see ourselves going back and forth where we are. Who are you going to consult with? It's the same people that you are not, their heads are not together, because one is saying this and one is saying that. And then, so, we'll just have to wait and see, because this is dragging, and I wouldn't be surprised if 2024 should end without a minimum wage implemented. Yes, it won't be news, it won't be shocking, because something that started since the beginning of the year, expected to be done by the first quarter and implemented in the second, and we are finishing this second quarter, about to enter the third quarter for the year 2000. There's no even decision yet. Talk more of the remaining processes that are supposed to be followed before now this minimum wage workers start seeing it. The federal government can just keep up doing what they are doing. In the end, we know that they are giving us answers. They are telling us, their action is speaking to us louder than their words. And I think Nigerians can be able to tell for themselves where this government are heading towards and what they truly have for Nigerians, because so far so good. It's not good, Sele, and it's tiring, the back and forth. I believe that this is not something that should be dragged up till now.
Well, let's just keep our fingers crossed, just like you said, Rachel, and let us see what the end result will look like. Well, before we continue further with the paper review, let's just take a time out so that we can let you through the stories, your own opinions concerning the federal government going to consult with us, the same people that they set up the committee. And then as well, we are seeing various meetings are holding on, and then so many things actually that we would love you to just, air out your own view about it. So when we come back, we will continue the paper review. Please stay tuned with us. Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories where we say the federal government will be consulting further before they decide on what the new minimum wage will be, as well as we're saying that the Senate president have said there is no plan whatsoever to get a private jet for the president and the vice president. And then a number of stories as well where we're seeing that operators are coming out, or as marketers rather, are saying that they are not importing dirty fuel, because that has been a back and forth between the Dangote refinery and the marketers. So quite a number of things that we would love to hear your own opinions about it. So you can do well to drop that on Facebook and on YouTube. Well, we will continue with the paper review looking at the Daily News Herb newspaper. Custom top short slums died during reps committee greeting, where we're seeing begs for water before collapsing. And I think it's at this point that we need our public health to always take care of their health, because possibly he might be going through some health challenge, and that's why he's slumped. More detail about what happened can be found in the paper. And we have on the national minimum wage. Let me consult further on what to pay, coming from the president Tinubu. As FEC stepped down minimum wage memo, over 500 bishops wade into NLC federal government crisis. More detail found in the paper. Ways and Means securitization responsible for 24 trillion naira debt rise, coming from the Debt Management Office. ASU issue fresh strike threat, says Tinubu on serious. Governor Obaseki sees borrow pit from Oba of Benin. And we have Ogun Senator Saliu addresses viral video incident, affirms commitment to public service. And on Naira abuse, Cubana chief priest fined 110 million naira as court strike out charge. On Naira abuse, Cubana chief priest fined 10 million naira as court strike out charge. And the hashtag Chivido 2024 Ogun Governor Seyi Tinubu Obasanjo Oni Grace Davido's wedding. Music star shows Choma parents' daughter will be protected and respected. More detail found concerning their wedding can be found in the paper. Kanu Governor rescue Ado Bayero daughter after eviction notice from Lagos apartment. Innocent bricklayer freed after 24 years in prison. More detail can be found in the paper. And coming from the Sultan, ascertain facts before commending Sokoto government chief. The VP Sheitima said it's not your duty to tell us to protect Sultan, it's our responsibility. Some governors pose threat to traditional institution stability, coming from Atiku. Downside of the paper, Senate never proposed new aircraft for Tinubu and Shetima, coming from Apabio, and that's all on Daily News Hub newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, the big story, new minimum wage. I need more time to consult. A statement from Tinubu. FEC steps down minimum wage memo for further consultations. Tinubu to consult with governors, private sector before sending proposal to National Assembly. Organized labor kick says failure to discuss memo giving room for speculation. New borrowing ways and means increased Nigeria's debt by 24.3 trillion naira in the first quarter of 2024, DMO discloses. On Euro 2024, England, France held to draws against Slovenia, Poland as Austria stunned Netherlands. You can find details on page 16. Emirship tussle, Sultan dethronement rumor, Atiku cries out. Call for protection of traditional institutions from state government arbitrariness. You can find details on page 3. Emefiele Gate again, court orders final for future of $1.4 million linked to ex-CBN governor. Custom grieves as identity of officer who died during Rep's investigation hearing is revealed. IMTOs obtain CBN's approval to trade on official market. Oyetola describes seafarers as lifeblood of the maritime industry. Cardoso expresses optimism, says worst of naira volatility over. Details can be found on page 5. You can find details of this entertainment story, Chivido 2024, intrigue, shades and lessons on page 14. And we have birthday boy Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu receiving a portrait from Dame Adara Ijimoji OON, Group Managing Director, CEO of Zenith Bank PLC, during a courtesy visit to the Lagos House Marina yesterday. And that's all news on the Matrix newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, minimum wage labors 250,000 naira demand unresolved as FEC step down the memo. Detail found on page 7. Terrorists using media publicity to recruit youths. This is coming from the NSA. CBN grant IMTOs naira access to boost diaspora remittance and liquidity. How illegal taxes, forceful membership of association is threatening hike of food price in Akwa Ibom. You can find that on page 2. And the first half of 2024, we're seeing the AMCON declares triple-digit growth, recovers 125.2 billion naira. And here we're seeing marketers accuse Dangote of selling dirty diesel, NMDPRA of attempted monopoly, as NMDPRA insists imported diesel meets regulatory standard. I hope that this can be rectified so we don't have the shades keep coming back and forth from both. And we have a monarch disposition. Atiku calls for constitutional reform to protect traditional institutions, and we're still having the picture story showing the birthday of the Lagos State Governor, which is celebrated with some students, and the other with the CEO of Zenith Bank. And that's all on Nigerian News Direct.
On the Daily Times, social media agog as Davido trauma wed in Lagos. The big story, new minimum wage, FEC steps down memo, opts for more consultations. Passage shouldn't linger beyond July, coming from TUC. Details can be found on page 2. Emefiele's trial witness can't confirm whether former CBN governor's wife signed Architecton document. Details can be found on page 6. Apabio denies Senate proposal of new aircraft for Tinubu and Shetima. Atiku condemned desecration of traditional institutions by politicians. FAAN deploys 120 AVSEC special forces across international airports. NASMON's Deputy Controller of Customs, SN. Details can be found on page 16. And we have fuel marketers deny importation of substandard products amid accusations. We have a picture story, participants at the Air Force War College during an international study tour to Morocco and Turkey. And that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
On daily independent newspapers, CBN orders banks IMTO to pay diaspora remittance in Naira. Atiku wants traditional institution protected from arbitrariness of governors. And the big news here says Tinubu asks for more time to consult on national minimum wage. Labour says it expects negotiation on wage to end by July. Once governors brace up for uniform implementation, you can find more detail in the paper. Coming from Labour Party, Obi champions Apapa Abure reconciliation. Asks NLC to shade sword. You can find that on page 29. FEC okays 1.99 billion naira CNG power vehicles to boost NDLEA operations. Pandemonium in Rivers as dynamite explosion injure pro-Wike protesters. You can find that in the paper. Cardoso assures on taming inflation through conventional method. DMO explained rise in Nigerians' public debt from the 97.34 trillion naira to 121.67 trillion naira. And on cholera outbreak, Tinubu raises Presidential Committee to oversee emergency operation. You can find out on page 6. ASU threatened fresh strike in 2 weeks over the 2009 agreement and others. More detail found in the paper, and I'm actually having a concern concerning this because we saw that on our paper where NAS are coming out to say that both the ASU and the federal government should please consider the student, because we know right now meetings are ongoing for the new academic year because a number of things have been put in place. So I'm hoping that whatever it is, it's already, we are saying here, they're saying that the president is unserious. So I hope that that is not really what it is. But he should come up with a plan as quick as possible, because here we're saying 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, schools will be shut. That is to say that the academic season will not start if they don't do something. So I'm worried. I hope that the government will adhere to this, because we've seen this over and over. We know that ASU is one of those bodies that don't play. Once they say 2 weeks, 2 weeks, no class, nothing, schools are shut. In fact, we saw even NASU also saying they will go on strike. So that is to say even the investigate will not be open, Rachel. That is the implication of that. So for those even running their master's program, if you are supposed to spend a year or two, you know you'll be spending the next 4 to 5 years just to actually get your master's degree. So I'm hoping that all that needs to be done should be done as fast or as quick as possible at this present time.
It's very important, because you look at the 2009 agreement, we're looking at 13 years later, and then certain things are not being implemented, and it means this has been in a span of 2 administrations, and then nothing has been done. A matter of fact, yes, 2 administrations are now in the Tinubu administration, and then you just can't help but wonder, why do we allow certain things to linger? Growth development is all about tiny steps that in the end you find out that you have covered a distance. You start bit by bit, and then before you know it, there is a significant amount of change. So I just hope that President Tinubu will make a difference. We saw ASU saying that he is unserious concerning their matter. So yes, they can't help but feel that way, looking at how long this has lingered. And of course, they have to take their plea to an administration, regardless of when it was agreed. I keep saying continuity is growth. Whether you accept it or not, it goes on. The fact that there was an agreement, whether you were the president then or not, you are expected to see it through regardless. So I just hope that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu doesn't just fold his hands and let ASU be, because you know what, we can have academic sessions without strike. We can have years and years go by without strike in Nigeria, without the academic staff union or universities going on strike. We can have it, but I am yet to see that happen within it's almost like after 2 years there's always a major strike. After 1 year there's just that major strike that just turns the academic calendar and all of that. I am looking for a smooth sail of at least a decade without strike in this country, and it's possible. It's possible. Start coming through with your agreement and implementing what ASU needs. They are not wrong for making demands. A lot needs to be done in our education sector. We talk about that every single day, and thank God there are unions out there calling the attention of the government and saying you need to do this. So let the government listen.
honestly, because if we're already having the NSA already complaining that, you know what, terrorists are using media publicity to recruit more members, Rachel, and we are not giving our education sector attention. So when you don't give attention, another body will give attention to those things that you neglect, and we will now have become a country that breeds more criminals eventually. Let us hope that our government will not work in that part. And the last story on data independence says climate change threats. Federal government banned single-use plastic in MDA. You can find that on the downside of the paper on page 6, and that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
On Nature News, Nigeria bans single-use plastic in government offices. Nigerians want farming mandatory for households. This is from Opinion Poll. Governor Eno provides 150,000 cocoa seedlings to Akwa Ibom farmers. Nestle trains students on environmental sustainability. You can find details on page 5. U.S. aid offers $26.6 million food initiatives grant to Nigerian companies. Kenya holds symposium summer school on climate justice. EU Environment Ministry trained journalists on climate change reporting. Details can be found on page 5. Kamik urges government to tackle gully erosion in Nigeria. Thomas Hope's new role brings luck in 13th tour. Details can be found on page 20, and that's all the news on Nature News.
Richard, this whole story, I think it's been on some papers, not all. The Nigeria banning this single use of plastic in public office, and I think it should not just be in public offices. We should ban it totally, Rachel. You can see the news and this whole thing is causing to our environment, our streams, our oceans, and we discussed that during the eradication of plastic, which is one of the key things that we discussed during the World Environment Day. The fact that we need to do away with plastics. In fact, polythene bags, we need to do away with them. If you need to go to the market, maybe you should get your basket, or you should get your what do we call this, full bags and all of that.
Yes,
those
paper bags.
Thank you so much. We could use that as well, because those can actually be recycled back again. So I just think that it shouldn't just be restricted to government offices. We're also at risk. So it's not just about the government offices. Everybody's at risk. So I hope that the government will look into making sure that everybody adheres to this particular instruction.
Of course, Stella, because when you look at these styrofoams and pack, they litter a lot because you can't use them again. And I believe that's the reason why it's a single use, because for this one in specific, it's single use. You can't use it twice. Whereas we have the other plastic packs that you can reuse, we store them at home. Nobody throws that one away. In fact, when you go for weddings and occasion, you are looking forward to having them because we use them for storage, for food at home. We use them to pack lunch, and all of that is being used over and over until it finally gets damaged. And then for that plastic, it falls under the recycle part, which makes it except if the government neglects it, but it doesn't have to be a problem because it cannot litter. It can be recycled. It's all about our refuge system working properly, yes, so that we will be able to recycle. But for this one, Seller, definitely I think no Nigerian can disagree. I know we would have people coming out talking about the jobs it creates and all of that, but in the end, people need to understand what pollution is all about. And the damage it has is that you might have the job tomorrow but not be able to go to it. The pollution and all of that, the climate change and all of that, people need to learn to think ahead. Stop thinking of the now and think of the future tomorrow. That when it comes to pollution, it is a dangerous thing. You might think it's just for the whale that got washed up because he swallowed plastic. No, it will be you tomorrow endangered because of this, because they don't degrade, they are just there in the soil permanently. They spoil, so you won't even have food tomorrow. If you think you have a job now, you won't have food tomorrow. That's what pollution does and all of that. So yes, it's definitely welcome. And then I think the government is saying their office, like, let them live by the example and let it start with them before but then it's for everybody at the end of the day.
Of course. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed on that. Let's take a look at the Sweet Crook Report newspaper. We have AKK gas pipeline project to be ready by the first quarter of 2025, says the government. Total Energies You Better Feel will record local content success, says the NCDMB. And we have NLNG $4.3 billion Train 7 project reaches 67% completion. And we have the picture story where we can see the NLNG 7 project being there in the picture. Another story on the paper, oil marketers eager for July petrol rollout from Dangote refinery. More detail of that can be found in the paper, and that's all on Sweet Creek Report.
On Punch Sport Extra, Golden Gloves, the big story, how Eagles' invitation inspired Obasoji NPFL record best keeper win. Details can be found on page 6. Liverpool ready £50.7 million Lookman offer. Plum Chair shows off recovery videos, and we have Osak Douala Akintola keeps 200-meter hopes alive. You can find details on page 2. Mbappe Lewandowski score in settlement. We have Spalletti knocks timid Italians over Croatia draw. You can find details on page 3. We have Georgia versus Portugal. We have Seleco I Group F clean sweep. Spurs agree 4-year deal with Madison. Details can be found on page 4. City Madrid in shock. £118 million swap deal. Arsenal plan Neto Medical before bid. Details can be found on page 4. Liverpool announced major sponsorship deal. Future star Odibo, Finland-born prodigy who thrives on fufu. Pereira rules out Adesanya trilogy. Details can be found on page 2. Quick Pen proud to future at Chess Olympic. Details can be found on page 2, and that's all the news on Punch Sport Extra.
On Business Day newspaper, demand for federal government Nigeria bonds slows as investors seek higher yields. What ShopRite exit means for Nova retail business in Nigeria. The worst over for Naira volatility, says Cardoso. The worst over for Naira volatility, says Cardoso. Nigerians gas export drops 25% on low output exit. You can find that in the paper. FEC step down minimum wage memo as Tinubu plans wider consultation. Detail found on page 29, and that's all on Business Day newspaper.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, Atlanta says 60 million euros for Lookman or no deal. So for the club that is looking to give in 50.7 and no deal for you, you can find details on page 6. Bernard not on NFS shortlist to replace Finidi. Fernandez officially joins Alcacer on free transfer. Details can be found on inside the paper. Fans defy sit-at-home order rain to celebrate Rangers' victory in Enugu. Sancho to accept pay cut to join Barca on loan. You can find details inside the paper. Declan Rice slams former teammate who called him very overrated. On Euro 2024, Modric becomes oldest scorer in European Championship history. Bayern puts Dayot Upamecano delight Minjo for sale. Details can be found on page 3. PSG refuses to pay Mbappe since February. Details can be found at the back page. Arsenal misses Guimaraes' £100 million transfer deadline. Fans to pay $1,276 for ringside seats for Mayweather next fight. Neymar brutally calls Vinicius Jr. ugliest footballer. You can find details at the back page. The big story, Ndidi rejects new contract, quits Leicester. Everton to table bid for Nigeria next week. You can find details on page 6, and that's all the news on Sporting Sun.
Well, that's how far we can go on the program. Thanks, Rachel, for doing this.
You're welcome, Celia.
Thank you to our viewers as well as to the entire production team and every other person that made this program a success. We look forward again to doing this tomorrow. Do have a great day ahead.